A History of English Literature from Earliest Times to 1916 by Arthur Compton-Rickett. Narrated by Anita Saran. Northumbria as an intellectual centre. The predominance of Northumbria in literary life was largely due to the activity of Irish missionaries, cultured and imaginative men, and to the greater influx of Roman civilization into the north. The library at York was famous throughout Europe. The earlier phase of this intellectual vitality is seen in the religious verse of Caedmon and his successors. The later phase in the Latin prose of the monk scholar. Of these, the first in importance is Bede. In these words did the orphan scholar epitomize his life at the age of 55. I wholly applied myself to the study of the Scripture, and amidst the observance of regular discipline and the daily care of singing in the church, I always took delight in learning, teaching, and writing. He studied eagerly every department of human thought, the philosophies, arts, and sciences. And to his ecclesiastical history we are indebted for our knowledge of the England of his time. He wrote in Latin for the most part, but was quick to recognize the possibilities of the Saxon tongue. And when dying, is said to have repeated to himself some of these old poems. He owed much to the abbot of his monastery, Benedict, a keen and brilliant man. Bede was a fine classical scholar, and his writings abound in quotations from classical poets. Much of his work was of the textbook order, and his reputation as a teacher was as considerable as that of his scholarship. He had a school at Jarrow of European fame. Wessex as an intellectual centre. With the coming of the Danes in the 10th century, the seat of learning passed to Wessex. The Danish invasions were catastrophic to the progress of English literature. Attracted by the wealth of the great monasteries, they plundered and destroyed the finest. Worst of all, they burned the splendid libraries, until there was not one house of learning left from the Forth to the Humber. Happily, a man arose at this time who rescued England from her sorry plight. And although too late to save the North, yet Middle and South England were preserved from ravage by the valorous mastermind of Alfred, Lord of the Harp and liberating Spear. Alfred, grandson of the doughty Egbert, was born at Wantage in Berkshire, and whilst a boy was taken by his father Ethelwulf to Rome. There, Roman civilization and ecclesiasticism impressed him in the most plastic years of his life. On his return to England, he became deeply interested in the songs of his native land, and the love of Saxon verse and the prowess of his ancestors never left him. From the dream of studious youth, he was roughly awakened by the onslaughts of the Danes, and his early years as king were spent in fighting hard against them. Mercia already had been ravaged and lost. Wessex itself was in deadly peril. Then did he prove that he was a great warrior as well as a keen student, that he could fight like his heroes as well as sing about them. Thus did he win peace for his people, and having won peace, he sought to nurture their mental life. So, after 15 years of incessant warfare, he had made peace with the foe and looked around to repair something of their wanton work of destruction. He founded a monastery at Athelney, saw to the education of his nobles, and while seeing to the careful training of the churchmen, was mindful also of the common people. He is the pioneer of popular education, for it was his wish that all the youth now in England of free men who have the wealth to be able to act themselves to it be put to learning while they are not of use for anything else. To effect this, he set to work to increase the abundance of English literature and superintend the translation of many Latin books for the benefit of the people at large. He prepared a handbook for the clergy, saw to the translation of much of Bede's famous history and adapted the philosophy of Boethius, a Roman patrician of the 5th and 6th centuries, for common use. He took, said Mr. Frederick Harrison, the Meditations of Boethius as a standard textbook of moral and religious thought, and he uses it as the basis of his own musings upon man, the world, and God. Alfred may be remembered also as the first Englishman of letters who was not a churchman, and the first to encourage the makings of English prose. He wanted to make it loved and known by the people at large, and this would not be done while it was written in the Latin language favoured by the Church. During his reign, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle came into existence, and if not his own work, it probably owed much to his inspiration. This is the most important landmark of Anglo-Saxon prose, and continued beyond the conquest down to the death of Stephen. No English king ever did more for his people than he. He had a genius for kingship and never abused that endowment. This brief record of Alfred's work may close with a passage from Boethius. To be brief, I may say that it has ever been my desire to live honourably while I was alive, and after my death to leave to them that should come after me my memory in good works. Of Alfred's greatness, then, there can be no question, but it was a greatness of personality rather than of art. He was not a great poet or a great proseman in the way that he was a great fighter and organizer. Nonetheless, by his zeal and industry, he did well by English letters. He had the rare merit of clarity in his writing and something of that naive charm which is often as delightful to the reader as literary skill. Alfred's successors. Wessex continued to hold its own in intellectual matters until the coming of the Normans. The north never recovered from the ravish of the Danes. Among the most notable names are Dunstan, Abbot of Glastonbury, Ethelwold, Edgar, and Elfric. Elfric, especially, concerned himself with the work of monastic reform. His writings were voluminous, the more important being his famous homilies, excellent example of Saxon prose, and some metrical lives of the saints. But the 10th century saw a decline on the whole in literary impulse. The influence of Rome, both in religion and scholarship, had done much to inspire the old Saxon writers. A fresh virile influence was now wanted. It came with the Norman invasion.